All right. Hi, everyone. This is Anthony Diaz with the Pop Health Show. And the show is for anyone that has a super strong passion for making the world a better place. Specifically, we've been uncovering the interesting sections and nuances of impact, health, and emerging technologies. And along those lines, I'm really enthused and excited to have my guest on the show today. So, Amit Grover is a serial entrepreneur for the past 16 years. He has a history of working with Fortune 500 companies. He's got a capital unit and an impact ventures unit, Grover Impact Ventures and Koinonos Capital. And I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I'm very excited to have him on the show today. Amit, thank you so much for joining me and for peeling off time to do this.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks for being here. And maybe you can teleport us back to your origin story, where things started for you. Why do you do what you do today? I always find stories interesting on the journey, what led you to where you're at today.
Certainly, Anthony, it's very important for people to understand what they do and why they do that. It's not as curated as people think. It's various things that happen in life. So I was born and raised in New Delhi, India. That's where I originally belong from. And, a single mom, who worked multiple jobs to raise me. So, life was tough when we were young. But having done that, after my undergrad, I started working with a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, started my career with a subsidiary of British American Tobacco in brand marketing in various markets. Then after a while, joined an Italian coffee company called Lavazza and was building that in India and Southeast Asia. Later on, I joined a French company called Pernod Ricard, which makes alcoholic beverages. So was kind of heading the brand marketing for Indian-made foreign liquor, and later on mergers and acquisitions. Took a sabbatical for 2 years, went to New Zealand to do a full-time MBA program. That's when I relocated to New Zealand. And after which I worked for a short while in consulting, and then pretty much made my way back to New Zealand from Australia to start Grover and Company. So the brand was born in 2008. With basically, motivation of helping small, medium businesses really evolve in terms of how they export their products and services from New Zealand to the world. As you would understand, New Zealand is a small country and is heavily dependent on exports because of its size. So obviously dairy industry, the meat industry, the wine industry, these are some of the top industries of New Zealand. So at that time, I started getting into the entire world of intellectual property, where I would basically advise businesses to look at their business from less of a business model and more of an asset. Because I kind of believe that business models are easier to disrupt, either through cost or differentiation. But asset, I'm not saying it can't be disrupted, but it has got a natural barrier to disruption. So I started helping early on a lot of these small, medium businesses build their specialty or their specialization or their trade secret into an intellectual property that could be licensed out to Asia and some of the emerging markets. So started off in 2008, and it's kind of been quite a growth journey. We went into Australia, we went into Singapore, Dubai, London. 16 years and running. We've done major work in the emerging markets. We've worked with over 300 companies in different sectors. 14 different sectors, 23 different countries. So we are quite a subject matter expert when it comes to intellectual property, not on the legal side of it, Anthony, more in terms of the IP strategy and how do you really commercialize that IP and having the commercial cap on. Of course, we work with third-party lawyers all the time for IP protection frameworks and, such like. So during this journey of building Grover and Company, many things happen. So it's not as straightforward as people think it is. I've had many instances where I've almost been bankrupt. I've had instances that I've almost lost my life. So in 2013, I met with an accident and I lost 6 feet of my intestines. I was in the hospital for 6 months. I was almost gone, mate. So I was in the hospital for 6 months. Came out, literally lost everything in business, and again started rebuilding it. I was on state support for a while, coming from the decorated background of Fortune 500 companies to really being on the streets. That's when you really realize that where you stand in life, all your colleagues, all your friends, they all disappear, mate. It's just gone. There's nobody around. It's an entire life cycle of discovering yourself because you're facing a situation that you never faced. So you're facing it for the first time. You're trying to make sense of how to come out of it. And there is no method to come out of it. You have to for everybody, you have to figure it out for yourself. How do you climb out of that deep hole? And as I was doing it, there was many emotions running through me. There was obviously a lot of anger for people who didn't, stand by me, who I thought would. That anger then becomes into frustration. That frustration then kind of becomes into, feeling sorry for yourself, self-guilt, and then finally that becomes forgiveness. But before that comes to that stage, the whole life cycle of emotions that you go through before you reach that and start forgiving yourself for what has happened and, put the past behind and start concentrating on building the future. What happened, you can't go back in time and change it. So there's no point, losing sleep over something you can't control and concentrating on something that you can. So that is easier said than done, but you have to go through your own life cycle journey to be really understanding that. So anyway, started standing up again and started building my business again and built that business second time around. While I was doing it the second time around, I think some of the pertinent questions that I started asking myself that, it's got to be more than money. It's got to be more than just, having social capital. It's got to be more than just kind of the obvious why you do business. Value creation, great. Capital creation, great. Maximizing shareholders' wealth, great. But there has to be something more fundamental to what you're doing and using your skills and the gift that God's given you. God's given everybody different gifts. It's just that half of us don't even realize what our gifts are on the journey of life. But some people like me, when we are faced with situations like that, we dig very deep. So that's the time where I started going into aspects of spirituality. I started going into aspects of the religion that I come from, not so much from a religion aspect, but from the point of where do I really belong? What is the soil that I come from? What's the 30,000-year-old history in that soil? And started asking myself a lot of questions because I was not getting any answers. That why this is happening to me. And, I'm very well educated with an MBA degree, with a Fortune 500 career. Why would it happen to that? So that's when, I really decided that beyond just making money is important because without resources, you can't drive any fundamental ideology. It needs resources. So that was obviously a constant. But what changed is my whole mindset towards where do I want to channelize my energy and where do I want to drive my business career? So sustainability was right staring at me. So that's when I started embarking on the world of sustainability. Within that sustainable ecosystem, I started going into food security. I started going into climate tech. I started going into some of these major issues that we are trying to solve in the world, without which humanity would cease to exist at the rate the world is going. Now, one always asks this question that if I've stumbled upon a new business idea or a new technology, if this technology ceases to exist, would it matter to the world? Now, that is what I was asking, that bigger the problem, bigger the remuneration, bigger the money, and bigger the need. So obviously energy was one of those aspects I was very, very, conscious about, that we are running out of energy. We are burning too much coal. We need renewable energy. And New Zealand was the perfect example of how a country can be 100% run on renewable. Today, a lot of countries are, including Netherlands. So I stumbled upon that. Koinonos Capital is basically partnering with organizations that are trying to drive renewable energy and sustainable mobility. So your electric vehicle charging, your electric vehicles, as well as renewable energy in the Middle East. So that's one fund. Grover Impact Ventures tried to drive a lot of technologies in food, especially alternative food. So the plant-based revolution happened, but I lost a lot of money. I mean, trust me, that revolution didn't take off the way that I thought it, beyond me. A lot of people thought that it's going to really take off. It's going to become mainstream. A lot of people are going to join that revolution. People are going to alter their way of eating, but it hasn't till now, kind of made those waves that we originally thought that it would. So I lost a lot of money, and with investments, it's the same way. I mean, there's no guarantees that you're going to make money. You believe in a concept, you go and bootstrap it, but how then that the world accepts it is something that you don't know. You can only put your best foot forward. Beyond that, majority, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, Anthony. And with the fear of sounding very spiritual and very philosophical, the reality is we actually control very little. That's the stark reality. We have so little things in control that's not even funny. So like I went into this sector thinking that, the alternative dairy and the alternative proteins is just going to be another way of life, which a lot of people are going to embark on. Now, few people did, but those few people were not good enough to build an entire business model and give investors the return that they thought. So I lost a lot of money and time and energy, trying to be a part of that ecosystem. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's all about hit and try. So currently we do two things. I'm still building a food security vertical where we are looking at cutting edge deep tech technologies in food that does not use the environment and land to grow food. So what's really happening in the world, especially I'm sitting in the Middle East. Now the terrain and the environment is not conducive to agriculture growth at all. So what really happens is the Middle East imports a lot of commodities and essential foods from all the neighboring countries that are agriculturally rich. So India, Egypt, and Africa, right? But when you import, you are obviously exposed to oil prices, supply chain, inflation, and all those aspects. So that's not the best model to be able to work with. So constantly the UAE government and the Saudi government are trying to kind of find technologies that could grow essential crops, protein and dairy without using the obvious natural environment and soil. So hydroponics, aquaponics, vertical farming are just small glimpses of what that could look like. Now the technology has to evolve on volumes and price, which is yet not achieved that. But look, it's a constant development, process. So we are trying to build something around that to solve the food security problem. Koinonos Capital is a perfect example of partnering with two of the biggest government bodies in the UAE, the Road Transport Authority, RTA, and the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, DEWA, where we are trying to, so RTA's mandate is to go 100% electric in the next 10 years. And we are helping them source technologies across the world to be able to meet that mandate. And the same with DEWA. The DEWA wants to be 100% renewable in the next 20 years. They're already 30% renewable. A lot of the energy produced in this part of the world comes through solar and wind, but they're obviously looking at technologies like hydrogen, ammonia, fusion technologies to be able to kind of fill that 70% of the gap over the next 2 decades. So, with these partnerships, we are driving a lot of these, companies in that space. Recently, we invested in a Swiss company. I spent about 10 days in Europe just recently, day before yesterday, I came back. So, the 10 days in Europe, we invested in a Swiss company called Evon Energies that's into electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We are currently test piloting that out in the UAE. And like we say in this part of the world, inshallah, if that works, then we're going to roll it out much broader. So these are some of the technologies that we are working with. So that's what's happening with the Koinonos Capital. With Grover Impact Ventures, we are rolling out 2 programs, which we have just recently started with government agencies. One is a venture IP program, where the motivation is that let's look at deep tech IPs that exist across the world and help them commercialize that in Middle East and India. With Middle East as a base, you expand to this part of the world. So we would give them the entire ecosystem and infrastructure with private and public agencies to be able to springboard and expand their IP and market their IP in this part of the world. So that's one program that we are setting up that I'm aggressively marketing under Grover Impact Ventures. And the second program is exactly the same, but for venture capital funds. VC funds that want to raise capital from the Middle East, take that capital and fuel innovation in their countries, and then get that innovation to commercialize in the Middle East. So when I mean the Middle East, I really mean UAE, Saudi, North Africa, Egypt, and India. The big markets with big volumes. So UAE acts as a great test pilot. So when you get a new tech into a region, it's not one size fits all. What works in America doesn't mean that it's going to work in India. Everything has to be adapted. So you need a contained environment that lets you test pilot the technology, iron out any hurdles that come in the way of adaptability, and then look at scaling it up once you've achieved that. So it's a step-by-step program. So we are marketing both these programs, the venture IP corridor and the venture capital corridor, across a couple of markets. The focus markets I'm looking at personally is Netherlands, New Zealand, and Australia. I obviously come from New Zealand. I'm a New Zealand citizen. I've lived there for over 16 years, so it's obvious. So New Zealand, Australia, and Netherlands are what we've started this with, and I'm sure it's going to expand. So I've got a venture capital arm that does food security and climate tech, and I've got Grover and Company, which is an advisory practice that is building these two programs. So that's in a nutshell what I'm engaged in these days.
I love it. I love it, Amit. No, I find your story fascinating, what you're doing right now and the way that you're approaching it and doing it as well. It's in reflection as well. You know, I have an MBA, and you know, obviously I'm running an early stage company. But I found the same. You know, it's that you have to go through a different type of journey. You have to go through the hero's journey, right? Which is those ups and downs, and go through a re-spiritualization. And you know, everyone's very knowledgeable, but you know, if you look at all the systems that we've created from all this sophisticated knowledge and all these MBAs running a lot of these corporations, we've set up a lot of obviously unnatural systems that have gotten in the way. Where, you know, obviously you face those headwinds directly or indirectly. That, you know, when you have legacy food chains, you know, stuck on, you know, fast moving product goods, and you know, they don't want to see kind of new stuff come in. But it's really fascinating to see what's happening in the UAE. It's a great test bed, great distribution. So it's an exciting place that you're at. And I'm sorry to hear about, you know, some of the struggles that you went through, but obviously it sounds like, you know it in your heart that God put you through those sure. challenges to get you where you needed to go, to see things literally from a ground soil level, right? To see that perspective where, you know, most people in venture capital, nothing against people in venture capital. I mean, I was born in Brooklyn. My parents were born in Puerto Rico. My grandfather ran a farm, you know, so I don't know anything about the silver spoon or anything like that. But a lot of venture capitalists have never gone really through, as you and I know, through struggles. And so the real problems of the world, it has to come from people that have seen that perspective. So congratulations on coming out of that struggle and coming out with such a more wiser, poised, and sophisticated approach to natural order systems. Tell me a little bit, Amit, about some of the deep tech stuff's fascinating, right? Spanning the world, driving deep, choosing that, seeing if you can get that in the UA. I just love to hear a little bit more about the technologies, the products. Be also in the spaces of regenerative agriculture and like that, and energy. What's promising, what's not? You know, you see so many different things. Tell us more.
So there are two things that we have to understand. So firstly, to drive anything deep tech, it's got to meet the mandate of the country. So it's pointless driving something that is not of a priority for the country or the region that you're trying to drive it in. So for me, the region was very clear. It's the Middle East, which is dominated by UAE, Saudi, and Qatar, with a big growth market, which is North Africa, the likes of Morocco and Egypt. And of course, the biggest cherry on the cake, India, which is 4 hours approximately. So this is the markets we are trying to drive things. Now, when you look at the UAE and Saudi, which are the two obvious markets with great infrastructure to be able to drive things, you need to study their 2050 vision. That what is the vision of the country, what sectors is the government trying to drive, and what is the list of their priorities. Obviously, you can't drive all the priorities, it's humanly impossible. So you select the priorities that A, you understand very well, and B, you know the government is going to back it in a big way because that's their mandate. So that's where renewable energy, sustainable mobility, and food security came about. So that's how the logic of dictating these sectors came into life. Now, when we are looking, so our business model is very, very different to a quintessential VC. So what happens in a regular VC firm is you basically punt on the entrepreneur and you punt on the business model for it to deliver. So typically a VC puts in money in a company, takes the company to the market, acquires customers, burns a lot of marketing dollars, and keep raising new rounds of capital from, let's say, 12 months right up to about 60 months. Seed, late seed, Series A, pre-Series A, Series B, and so forth and so on. And at some stage, the early stage VCs exit, making their margin. That's typically your VC model. So it hangs upon two major factors, among others. So one major factor is the entrepreneur themselves and their ability to build the business. And more than building the business, keep raising capital. That's the whole game of VC. The more capital that you raise, the early stage VCs get more fit. And number two, to be able to, obviously, the business model, to be able to build market share, grab a lot of market share. Now, we've taken the risk out of it. So what we essentially do, which is inspired through my consulting practice, is we only bootstrap IP. So if there's no intellectual property in the picture, we don't even touch a company. In the sectors that I talked about, which is renewable energy, sustainable mobility, and food security. Once we've identified the IP, we test pilot the IP with some of the partners that we have in ground. So RTA is one of them, Diva is another one, and really look at whether that technology performs in the local region or not. Once the technology performs, then we license it out to some of the biggest energy companies, some of the biggest sustainable mobility companies in the region. And if the solution works for them, they generally acquire the company. So in a nutshell, we are in the business of buying and selling IP. So we are not investing on the business model, and we are not investing on the entrepreneur's ability to keep raising new rounds of capital.
Right.
We are investing on the asset. So it's about looking at your business as an asset rather than a business model.
Yeah, I love it.
Because I'm a firm believer that innovators are innovators. The reason why people say that 20% of your portfolio companies would give you 80% of your returns in a venture capital fund, which means 80% of the companies are going to go down and not produce anything. That to me is a flawed model. It's like standing on a Russian roulette table and, betting on a lot of numbers. Now, I don't like that approach personally. I have nothing against people who do that. Some of them have been very successful doing that. But I personally don't like that model. I personally believe in creating real value. And I always believe in the fact of core competence. So when entrepreneurs think that we are innovators, but we got to go and raise money and create that commercial core competence that we don't have by hiring people, if that was the case, then 80% of the companies won't fail. As simple as that. The problem that you are seeing such a high failure rate today is where we are trying to shift away from our core competence. So let's take an example of food, right? If you are an innovator who stumbled upon a fantastic alternative protein product that meets taste, texture, cost, and all of that, you've IP'd that product. Now you're going ahead and raising capital to get production, to support distribution, to support marketing, to get into retail, food service, QSR, HoReCa, and all the chains to commercialize the product, and even direct to consumer. I'm saying, why do that? Develop something, license it out to somebody who has the manufacturing, has the distribution, and has the customers already. So for me, if I was one of these plant-based companies, I would develop a product for Nestle. I would develop a product for Unilever. I would develop a product for Tyson Foods. I don't care whether my brand slapped onto it or not, as long as what I have invented reaches the customer and becomes mainstream, because they have the entire value chain already existing. Why should I replicate that in any form of way? And even if I try to replicate that, I'm not going to be successful. Look at what's happening to Beyond. With all that hype, with all that bloody nonsense that we saw from 2020 to 2022, today you look at where they are, look at where Oatly is. So this is the problem, where we sometimes believe that we don't stick to our core competence, and we think that money can solve us the problem because we can get experts and then we'll build the business bigger than an MNC. That doesn't work like that. You've got people with the value chain, which doesn't have the innovation. You have the innovation, but you don't have the value chain. Marry innovation with value chain, and it's a perfect marriage. So we tell innovators, you concentrate on your core competence, which is innovation, license and divest to companies who've got a value chain, take that money back, and then start innovating even further, because that's your job.
And Amit, I guess, how do you find this deep tech? What is your process for finding the best of the best, and then making sure that you have the right buyer reception and market for the UAE? I can imagine you have it's almost like you're a glue for the marketplace, but are you using AI algorithms, just a very vast network, or you're looking for attributes, or it's obvious? Is it a little bit more obvious?
It's very obvious.
Yeah.
So there is no algorithm that you can use here.
Yeah.
When you talk about the world of deep tech, it's very limited. It's highly specialized, it's highly academic, and it's highly research driven. Not every university has that capability of doing the research. So obviously in Europe, there are a handful of universities that are doing cutting edge research. Same with Australia and New Zealand. So you're looking at places in the world where such research is getting bootstrapped. So America is one of them. Canada is another one. Australia, New Zealand is some. And the Netherlands, Germany, and of course, Scandinavian countries. These are a handful of countries that are doing a lot of deep tech research. So you have to go, which is attached to academia, because research generally happens at an academia level, right? So a lot of these incubators and accelerators supported by universities, like for example, we work very closely with the Delft University, the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands. We work with Utrecht in the Netherlands. We work with University of Auckland in New Zealand. We work with University of New South Wales in Sydney. So it's a very small ecosystem, Anthony, and that's the reality. So you don't need to run an algorithm-based approach because you're not skimming through thousands and millions of data to be able to reach specific data. Both food security, sustainable mobility, and renewable energy and cutting edge deep tech within these industries are only handled by a handful of countries and a handful of people. Within that ecosystem, I am only in charge of Australia, New Zealand, and Netherlands because it's impossible to kind of have your engagement with 30 countries. It's not practically feasible. So within these 3 countries, the ecosystem is so small that everybody knows everybody. So you work with those 5 or 6 universities or that 7 or 8 venture studios, and that's enough for your deal flow.
Amit, when it comes to the future of the things that you're looking at, the different themes, obviously major themes is mobility, energy, sustainable food. What are you starting to see a trend? So if you fast forward to the future and kind of you view yourself like, hey, I did my work, I invested in these things, and it's like 10, 20 years from now, in those 3 categories, it sounds like you're going to be in these categories for a while, right? With this type of model. What trend would you have seen? Would you have seen like hydrogen went out and that dominates and you don't see as much fusion or fission? You don't see as much maybe solar on the mobility side? Or cars running on hydrogen? Are they running on something else? On sustainable food? Is it these like cities of sustainable, vertical farming in cities and having a certain ratio? What does the future look like? What is sort of the right model? And I'm sure you probably have some biases that maybe other people don't believe, but what do you believe are like the category winners in those 3 categories? I'm kind of curious if you're seeing, really something start to break to the top. Yeah.
I think one of the category leaders that will drive all of this together is going to be the emergence of smart cities along with circular economy.
Right.
Where on the consumer level, there is going to be a big demand for living life the way that today we only dream of. That is going to become a consumer desire. So what is the future versus what is the desire of consumers are 2 completely different aspects. So today with electric vehicles, you are looking at EVs becoming mainstream, where people are junking BMWs and Mercedes and buying a Tesla. Now, that's not because that they're very conscious about the environment. Trust me, 90% of the people aren't. But it becomes a style statement. It becomes an aspiration, and makes them feel and sound and look very cool. That you're doing something that's right. So I think the emergence of smart cities that is supported by regenerative agriculture, which is supported by vertical farming, which is supported by renewable energy, and a completely circular economy is going to be the future in my view. It's purely how I'm looking at it. In terms of what I do is, what we have to understand, there are 2 biggest barriers with both renewable energy as well as sustainable agriculture and sustainable mobility: scale and price. Now, all these technologies are fantastic when you look at them in a contained environment of what they promise to produce and what they're producing. The moment you try to scale it up to meet costs and get it to a much larger pool of customers, a lot of these new technologies fall apart. So I think the challenge is going to be to produce scale, to produce size, and to produce costs that are viable for customers to pay for it. So I think it all hangs. So EVs currently are working on lithium, right? And lithium mining itself is a very polluting activity, and it's a very socially and economically distressing activity how lithium is getting mined. So that can't be a solution to power electric vehicles. There has to be a significant amount of hydrogen, a significant amount of fusion, and other technologies coming in. Now, the biggest problem with hydrogen is stability. That how do you, in a small contained environment, get stability so the car doesn't blow up with the person in it, and you can produce as much energy that is required to fuel the car before you go on to fueling cities. That's the next level. Even with solar and wind, it only produces a certain amount of energy, and it takes a lot of space. I mean, if you look at solar parks, it's a lot of land that you're using. So the technology is evolving, and it will evolve to a point where the infrastructure will start getting smaller, but the generation of power from that infrastructure will increase. Now, but that's a while away. I think a lot of people are researching and coming out with new technologies, but again, scale and price still seems to be the biggest barrier towards commercialization and stability of energy. Because a lot of these energies are great, but they're not stable.
And then what's your thesis then on, the one category obviously that comes up a lot is the materials category and how it affects circular economy. And obviously you have a lot of, petroleum, you have a lot of, plastics and improper metals being used in an unscalable way that cut across those different industries. Are you starting to see any theses or have any theses around how recyclable materials like plant-based materials lately? I don't know what it is. Over the past 3 weeks, I've been obsessed going back in history from Henry Ford, making a car in hemp. I don't know if you remember, so obviously hemp has so many uses and things like that. Do you see that the materials, the daily plastic use of things like that, there's some emerging opportunities there that can help improve the circularness of those three other, categories and the way they progress in the future?
100% in a lab. When you do these things in a contained environment in a lab, and you take out these materials that these are 100% biodegradable that can be used, but then start scaling it up in terms of quantity and volume and price, and it falls apart. This is the problem I'm talking about. Whether it's seaweed, whether it's cactus, whether it's hemp, or it's any kind of material that is 100% biodegradable and good for the environment. How do you produce the kind of volume that is needed? I mean, BMW manufactures probably 58 million cars a year.
Yeah.
Now, how do you get that kind of quantity? It's impossible. Then that means deforestation, right? End of the day, if you need land to produce a certain material, you need land. You need to cut down forests.
Right. I love it, Amit. This is great. I guess the one thing that intrigued me as well is obviously the cost model, the structure, currencies. You have different currencies, different countries, right? Middle East even has different currencies between the countries. Do you have any theses on some of the newer emerging technologies, right? One would say that intelligence, the explosion of intelligence in AI is creating itself compound currencies as well. Intelligence will be like a currency in itself. You also have decentralization and blockchain and cryptocurrencies that obviously can cut across central bank digital currencies that are rising. Do you have any theses on how these emerging technology trends like AI, blockchain, decentralization, or currencies could or should affect what you're doing in a good way? Are you watching out for those emerging technologies or have any theses there?
Yeah, I don't invest in that part of the world, but I am a thought leader in that part of the world because of purely economics.
Yeah.
Now, when you try to use intelligence into currency, it's basically the world of tokenization, right? Everybody's talking about tokenizing everything in the world.
Yeah, from water.
Right. So I mean, so it's for me, it's going a little too far. I think people with that kind of intellectual ability have far many areas to solve. So this is my point. If tomorrow cryptos go away, would it matter to the world? Will the world cease to exist if there's no crypto?
Right.
But will the world cease to exist if there's no food? If there is no energy because of the floods and the droughts and the famines that are happening? Will the world cease to exist if inflation goes up by 200%?
Right.
Because of some of those geopolitical conditions as well as supply chain issues that we are facing. Now, there are bigger problems in my eyes to tackle rather than trying to create a problem. And the entire world of decentralized finance where, see, blockchain has been existing for a long time. It's only crypto made it popular.
Yeah.
It came to the limelight of average person's mind because crypto works on blockchain. But blockchain has been around for a while.
Yeah.
And blockchain has given way to crypto, not the other way around.
Right.
So that people have to understand. The second thing people have to understand the concept of tokenomics. That how does it really work? Now, I tell you who backs a cryptocurrency. Now, when people in a very sublime way by looking a couple of documentaries say, oh, they're printing so much of currency and then there is no logic behind it. I'm like, look, dude, go and read your basic economics 101. A currency is derived, the value of the currency is derived from the GDP, the gross domestic product of a country, the imports and the exports the country does, as well as the international placement that country has in terms of its economic clout. You just don't derive a value of the currency because you feel like deriving a value. It's not your whims and fancies. So it's a very complicated economic model with reserves, with gold, with precious commodities, with the amount of GDP you have. There are many factors that go in. What goes in behind a crypto, which is a private currency floated by a billionaire somewhere to make a fool of other people?
Right.
Currencies, and that is what's really happening. It's going towards regulation. What does regulation do? It caps your fluctuations. So it can't fluctuate beyond a certain point, and it can't go up beyond a certain point. So the moment you do that, it becomes unattractive, right? It's attractive because it's not regulated. So someday it's up by 100%, the other time it's down by 80%.
Right.
So governments and currencies will never let that happen because it's regulated and there's an instrument regulated. So I think what people have to understand is blockchain. If you divide this entire decentralized world of finance, I personally feel the biggest drive that I see is going to be blockchain. Many businesses will benefit from being on the blockchain and working as using DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. That's going to be the real value that people will derive from blockchain, both layer 1 and layer 2. And going into tokenomics and tokenizing everything is still a little early, but I believe and very firmly that equity shares that you have in companies will be at some stage in the evolution replaced by tokens. Because right now what is happening, if you do a crowdfunding round, that crowdfunding only works in a certain geography that you're based in.
Right.
I, from sitting in India, can't invest in a crowdfunding round in the US. I can't because I'm not in that jurisdiction, right?
Right.
So tokenization, especially certain markets where crypto exchanges and tokenized exchanges are legal, like Dubai is one of them, Singapore is another one, Switzerland is another one, Hong Kong is another one. So there are a few countries now legalizing, kind of crypto and crypto exchanges and the world of digital assets. Mm-hmm. One could invest in a company that's tokenized and trading on the exchange in Dubai without having to worry about where you're based. It just gives you global access to investment. And I think that's where eventually things are headed towards. Might not be in the next 2 or 3 years, might take a bit of time, but eventually that's the crypto to me is, anyway. I'm not a big fan of crypto. Anyway, every currency is becoming digital. Like, this whole concept of digital currency. When is the last time you used cash? I mean, for the last 10 years, I've been using cards, and that's nothing but basically digital currency, right?
Right.
All network. So the reality is all the major currencies, the euro, the dollar, the pound, they're all going to become digital. They're all going to be traded on these digital currency exchanges, and they're going to regulate the hell out of every crypto, which means that all these cryptos will lose their value.
Right.
Currency, what we have to understand is a factor of the usability of the currency. You can't take Bitcoin today and buy a loaf of bread down the street to your normal vendor. It has to be first converted into fiat and then used on your Apple Pay, which means different points of consumption where you're losing money.
Yeah. No, I love it. I appreciate the perspective, definitely. And it sounds like do you foresee IP and energy being tokenized at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything will be tokenized. What we have to understand, why does it need to be tokenized? It needs to be tokenized for a global acceptance. So that if I have an energy project, my jurisdiction shouldn't become a restriction for the globe to invest in my venture.
Right. And in the process of, do you see a linear correlation then with asset categories getting tokenized across multiple countries? And then do you see a major impact on GDP for major countries going up as a result of that?
100%. You look at Dubai, I mean, because they've tokenized and because they've regularized the digital asset world, you today talking about fractional ownership of real estate, talking about tokenization of real estate, and the economy is going up by leaps and bounds. I mean, just to give you a figure, more than $300 billion have moved in less than 12 months in Dubai.
It's unprecedented. It's people don't even realize, I think.
They don't. I mean, today, the world of finance is very different. I mean, people want to stick to old shit without wanting the change. I mean, this is what I don't really understand. When we're buying a car, when we're buying a computer, we want the latest. But when we talk about a business model and our strategy and our way of thinking, we don't want to embrace the change.
Yeah. It's like we're stuck. I think a lot of people are kind of under the spell and they're kind of doing what they're told and they don't realize that their thoughts were really not their own, right, as well.
I think for a start, at least venture capitalists and the smaller companies, not so much the big MNCs, but the
Yeah.
smaller companies should not hire MBAs. In fact, if you're an MBA, you should be rejected from that position because MBAs teach you how to become an employee.
Yeah.
No MBA is designed to teach you. Tell me one entrepreneur that has become an entrepreneur because of the MBA they've done.
No.
I could go back in time, the $150,000 I spent behind an MBA, full-time MBA program, I'd probably put that money in a Masters of Economics or a course.
Right.
Not
right.
MBA only teaches you how to be an employee and a slave.
I tell people the same thing. I told someone that the other day as well. I would cash back in my MBA for another set of shorter, more concentrated
100%.
knowledge.
100%.
And the free thinking is really important too. I mean, we didn't talk necessarily about sustainable healthcare and universal basic healthcare, but one analogy we've been talking a lot is we spend over $1 trillion on healthcare, but the world's not healthier, 100%. Right? And the reason why is you just have these really odd constructs of improper, unnatural consumption and major promotion of that, and that gets in the way. And obviously, that kind of led to your kind of sort of like spiritual journey as well, as like you came across Headway. You're like, oh no, this is the ultimate, new plant protein milk or plant protein. It should be adopted, honestly, but you're just rudging up against the supply chains.
I'm telling you, in 2020, New Zealand wanted to legalize cannabis and CBD, recreational use like the Netherlands, and there was a referendum, and 49% people voted for it and 51% against it. That's why it couldn't go and become legal. I feel that you should ban tobacco and make weed legal because it's less harmful than tobacco, which is made of 108 chemicals to preserve that tobacco and all. So nicotine is not your enemy. Mm-hmm. It's the chemicals that go into a cigarette is your enemy.
Right.
The preservative, because it's a perishable commodity. It needs to be preserved. The entire world of CPG, consumer packaged goods, in the food sector, which is heavily infused with emulsifiers, preservatives, and other kind of chemicals to achieve shelf life stability, is the enemy. The entire universe of fast casual food, where I'm going to get food with no effort. Your biggest enemy. The way those chickens are grown, the way those are injected with. So dairy is not bad if you grow it organically. If you cultivate cows at your home that our grandparents did, or our great-grandparents did, and every home would have a farm and cows and goats and things like that. And you would organically. So the way our ancestors lived is become the way of life for the billionaires today. So what are billionaires doing today? People who've really made wealth, they're ditching their smartphones. They're hiring people to erase their digital footprints. They're going back to farms and driving manual cars, like manual Range Rovers. They're living off the land. They're having cows and drinking milk from their own cows. So they've gone back to living the way our ancestors used to live.
Off-grid,
Because today, with the whole consumerism, every MNC is selling poison, mate. It's basically we are consuming poison from vegetables to fruits, the way they're grown through insecticides, pesticides, and the way we're using, because you can't get yield like that.
And then in the water, right? Every time we go to drink lots of water, it's dangerous. We have to be very cautious.
100%. That this is where the problem is, that greed, and control.
It is fascinating, in terms of the natural order, it is, obviously political, I'm not going to make a comment for or against, but what I would say is, there's something to be said with the way that our grandparents did things and the naturalness when you actually compare biology, consumption, and everything holistically end to end. Ancient knowledge that's in all of our spiritual books that are around for thousands of years. It has the recipe in it, and deviating too much from that natural order, society does pay the consequences. Almost like the same analogies with like cotton, it's like cotton takes a lot of water. There's also, so that's why I've been thinking we've been, obviously there's a lot there about hemp. Even the garments that we wear need to be a lot more natural. And a lot of people just don't realize what's in the things that are on their skin, what they're drinking, what they're eating. And there's this powerful opportunity, but it's fascinating to see what the UAE is doing, because they really are rethinking the natural order and the way that a city should be made.
I had major reservations when I came to the UAE 6.5 years back. I came from New Zealand. It's a very liberal, it's a very forward thinking country, but I tell everybody that, do you see me marketing New Zealand? What do you see me marketing?
Right.
I mean, honestly, coming from such a liberal country, which is so advanced in sciences, which has such a social fabric that people talk about, it tops the charts in the world when it comes to social equality, your state support, and all the metrics that make a country the most admirable country to live in. And yet you see me marketing UAE because this country is making waves and changing the way they think about the future. I mean, opportunities do have a chance to flourish in this part of the world. They're super open-minded in terms of, and all this rubbish about, it's a very conservative part of the world. It's nothing but garbage and rubbish. Take it from a person who's a Kiwi, who's been living here for 6.5 years. And I can tell you, except for perception, there's no reality to it.
Mm-hmm.
This is by far one of the most open-minded cities in the world, the most advanced city in the world, and their appetite for technology, deep tech, and their appetite for renewable energy, sustainable mobility, health tech, ed tech, you name the industry that's growing. Artificial. We're the only country that have a minister of AI. We are the only country in the world that has a Web3 and AI campus under DIFC. That's Dubai International Financial Center. I mean, there's a mandate that every government department year on year has to embark on AI as part of their processes. So this is how the change in the drive is happening, mate. I don't see it happening in any other country.
Yeah. Amit, this has really been great. I mean, I have so many other follow-up questions I want to ask you about, the soil and the sand of UAE and what you guys are thinking and how you convert that, or if that's rectifiable and things like that. But what I'd love to do is have you back on the show. I'd love to go deeper on some of these, maybe like in the next 3 to 6 months, you come back, talk a little bit more about your investments, how this IP is going. I'm sure this whole land of tokenizing IP is one that's going to pick up a lot faster than what people in the venture capital are moving. I think the venture capital sector is going to lose a lot of talent moving over to models like yours, which are really kind of more, I think it's a more fascinating, more proven, make sense model as well too. Yeah, the VC, I think a lot of VCs out there are really kind of, scratching their heads. They're like, there's got to be a better way to this model to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And the mandates that they're under, right? A lot of VCs, it's like you come to them and they're like, oh, sorry, my mandate is this. And it's this really narrow segment, but they're kind of stuck in that mandate, right? So essentially they're investing someone else's money for a specific.
The problem is that they're trying to build a model. Think about it. If you're a Chevron, and in America, the ventures coming out, renewable energy ventures come out. I mean, is it possible that you'll ever be able to take on Chevron? Right. So why not? I mean, why compete when you can collaborate, man?
Yeah.
Basically bootstrap the innovation for them. They can't have all the innovation in the world. Give them every year 10 innovations, and out of which, even if 3 are more valuable for commercialization, sell it to them. They've got the whole distribution that you will never have.
Absorb it. Trying to deny that path is not.
I think, Anthony, we all have to understand, which we very conveniently forget in the garb of our dreams, that everybody's got a certain place in the value chain.
Yeah.
You can't just skip that place and go there without having done your time.
Right.
So understand your place in the value chain and maximize your place rather than looking at somebody else's place in the value chain. Right.
Which it's very ego driven, like in the promising models that have gone to just succumb to ego of the founder or the.
It's all about that. It's basically ego.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, like fund managers, venture capital fund managers are super egoistic. And I always remind them when I'm at a conference, don't forget the word manager on a second.
Yeah.
The only thing that you do is manage a rich person's money, and you pay 2% to do it.
Yeah.
It's a goddamn high profile job. Stop thinking that you are the person managing your own money. The real game is when you become an investor yourself.
Yeah.
That's when you multiply. In a venture capital fund, you have to first return them the 2% that you've charged for the first 5 years and the 1% that you charge for the next 5 years, and all the interest they've lost in the money. And then you can get your carry, if possible.
Yeah.
Half of the time, that doesn't even happen. So, you have to first return them 2x before you can make your money.
Yeah.
Most VC fund managers are just interested in that 2% that they get for the next 10 years.
Yeah. It's very focused.
So I think it's a glorified job. There is nothing, in my opinion, very glamorous about it.
Yeah.
It's hard work. It's very non-glamorous. You have constantly a sword on your head because you're managing somebody else's money. There's a lot of pressure. But these people behave as if they've got like, I don't know, like, you should see their attitude and the way they come across as if it's their money. And, it's not yours money. You're just a manager. You're on a goddamn job managing.
It's an exciting time that's changing too. And obviously entrepreneurs and even early stage founders are becoming a lot more savvy to realize that, it's about, just realizing your place in the ecosystem and how to properly get there. I'm fascinated by your model, and I can talk with you probably another 4 hours about your model, what you're doing. It's a blessing what you're doing. I would say, just personally speaking, it is fascinating. And there's probably nothing else that matters than creating natural order systems and trying to get those distributed out into the world and flowering as fast as possible. It's a really important time in history, as we know, and everything that's going on. But Amit, I guess my very last question for you as we end here, if our listeners wanted to get engaged with you, reach out to you, maybe they have an innovation in the space that we talked about, what would be a good way to engage with you or reach out to you if you'd like that to happen?
I think LinkedIn is probably the fastest way. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so people can find me on LinkedIn and connect with me, write me a message, and typically in 24 hours, I give them a reply.
Great. Well, Amit, it was exciting to hear about your origin story, the hero's journey you went through, the struggles you overcome, and obviously the spiritual insights you gained and the perspective has obviously led to where you're at, which obviously you didn't say, but I can imagine you would never take back those struggles if you could, right? And that's the benefit of just going through this of what you went through. And it's important for our personal development, obviously. The people that impact the things most in the world obviously had to see things from a very specific perspective that God put us through. So this was great to connect with you, Amit, and love to have you back. And to our listeners, again, this is the Pop Health Show. The show is for anyone that has a super strong passion on making an impact in the world and fascinated by the intersections of impact, health, and emerging technologies. Amit, thank you so much. This was great.
Thanks so much. Cheers.